Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on another edition of ArcadiaB Signal. I'm Tanya, and I'm thrilled to be hosting the special conversation with Gustavo Flores, who is the founder and CEO of Aureo and formerly known as Swapito. Gustavo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Tanya. How are you doing?
Doing great. So today I just wanted to take the opportunity and start off, tell people a little bit more, what's your story? Where do you come from? What are you doing in Mexico City? Just give us a brief background.
Yeah, certainly. So I was born in Peru, but I grew up in Montreal, Canada. I spent 20 years of my life here, where in which I discovered Bitcoin. I started my career in the Bitcoin industry. I founded multiple startups, and a lot of people know me from my time in Canada. The main things I did in Canada was lead the Bitcoin Montreal community of Bitcoin meetups for from 2018 to 2022, and I also had a startup called Verified, which was offered white glove Bitcoin exchange and self custody guidance services. And then I worked at Bull Bitcoin as vice president in 2021. I worked at Wasabi as a content writer, and I'm now a writer at Bitcoin Optech, which is a technical Bitcoin newsletter, and I'm also the CEO and founder of Aureo, previously known as Swapito.
Awesome. And so tell us a little bit, about your story. What happened? Why did you go from Canada all the way down to Mexico?
Yeah, well, I that was during COVID. We just thought that lifestyle in Canada was a bit harsh. Was a bit something we just didn't want to tolerate. And also, I think because we were already Bitcoiners, we kind of had this very freedom centric idea, and we just thought that hey, maybe there's an alternative to being confined and living under COVID lockdown. So we went to Costa Rica, and then we went to like southern Mexico, and we were exposed to just a different lifestyle where actually people didn't care that much about what others do, and you could just be freer. So I guess I just fell in love with Mexico through that experience. And although right now, today I'm in Canada for visiting my family, I live in Mexico City. I'm part of the Bitcoin community down there, which is called La Casa Satoshi, which you've been a part of too. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. I think what was also interesting is that Canada, I feel like was like the United States, has already a very developed Bitcoin ecosystem. So there's not a ton of value I could bring extra, but I think in Mexico and in Latin America there's still a lot missing. So that's where I and my co-founders want to bring more value.
And go ahead, tell us a little bit more of how you found Bitcoin and how this maybe has evolved into what you're doing right now and the kind of value you want to bring to the Mexican community.
For sure, I found Bitcoin when I was 18 years old. I was really lucky, honestly. We were just looking for ways to make money, and we found Bitcoin as a way you can mine this thing on your laptop, and it gives you money. First time I dismissed it, and just like 1 2 years later, I heard about this random altcoin called Potcoin. It was around the time like marijuana was getting legalized in Canada, so people were speculating, and this was a coin founded in Canada. So Magic, my co-founder, he was like, "Hey, we should get into this crypto," and I was like, "Hey, but look, there's this Bitcoin thing which we spoke about years ago, which is actually the dominant of this crypto category." So we just bought Bitcoin instead. And for the first couple of years, I was very much altcoin focused, or at least I didn't understand the difference between Bitcoin and the rest. And it was through the bear market of 2018 when I actually went to work on Bitcoin full time and I did a Bitcoin mine in Canada that I understood the differences. And that's probably the moment where I actually became a real Bitcoiner and a Bitcoin maxi.
Amazing. And where do you think you drew the line? Like when did you come to a realization that it was Bitcoin and not crypto basically?
Yeah, the experience that led me to that was actually when was not only was the bear market price change, you could see a reduction in 95 to 99% for most cryptos. They just went from $100 to one, so complete evaporation of wealth. And the prices I saw in the bull market 2017, most cryptos still haven't surpassed those prices. So like if you look at Litecoin or Ripple, they still haven't surpassed their all-time highs back then. So I guess that was a big realization, just how value can evaporate so quickly. And then you look at the fundamentals and you realize all these projects are completely centralized. They're completely an antithesis to the Bitcoin ethos and experience. But also, there's another important thing that happened then. It's that I was trying to build a big crypto mine of Ethereum GPU miners, but instead I shifted it to a Bitcoin mine when I understood that it didn't really make sense to build like an Ethereum mine. They were already talking about plans of shifting to a proof of stake model. What is proof of stake? What is the value in mining? So through all these trying to make a business out of it and also living through the experience of bull and bear markets is kind of when you have a reality check on all these things, right? Because when the prices are just going up and you're not looking at how things work for real, it's easy to just believe that it's all similar. But it takes a real bear market to actually ask you the question, what am I here for? And I'm here for separation of money and state. I'm here for building on Bitcoin what is truly a decentralized and censorship resistance currency. And that's what I want to bring in. I want to bring more awareness and I want to make this Bitcoin the default savings technology in Latin America.
Amazing. I just want you to touch a little bit on what you've seen from the Bitcoin community. Tell us not just about Casa Satoshi, but what you've seen in other places, whether that be Monterrey, it's Merida where we're going in the conference, or just other places in general. What have you felt? What have you seen? How does one community look different to the other?
That's a great question, Tanya. So I would tell you that I haven't been to all communities, but the ones that I've been to the Guadalajara community multiple times, and that one is quite different because it's very software development focused. So they got very technical presentations that are and their goal is to create just a software development focus. It's led by Chris Gita, who's a Bitcoin developer, and now he's training others to become Bitcoin developers as well. In La Casa Satoshi, we do have a technical BitDevs meetup, which I lead and I host, where we talk about technical topics. But it's more like an investor community, where people from all circles of life, from all different ages, they come to the Casa Satoshi and they want to learn more about how to invest in Bitcoin, how to adapt it in their business. So I see a big contrast between the Guadalajara and the Mexico City community. In the south of Mexico, because there's more proximity to El Salvador in location and culture, we've seen a bigger interest in towards developing like Bitcoin circular economies, and that's a big concept in Merida and around that region. There's also communities in tourist hubs such as in Cancun or in Puerto Vallarta, which I haven't had the chance to go, but my co-founder Magic has, where it's mostly foreigners, Canadians, Bitcoiners like me that came to Mexico because they wanted to look for an alternative, or they just can afford a more global lifestyle. Bitcoin kind of opens your mind to the point where you realize I can live anywhere, I can work from anywhere. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what they're doing in Monterrey, because I think that most of the capital, our ArcadiaB team, is based in Monterrey, and I think the quality of the meetups I've seen that they've done are very high, very academic and professional standards. But there's also Puebla and Mazatlan and Cuernavaca. So, and all of these communities have basically appeared in the past 2 years. So when I got into Mexico, I was like, there's nothing going on, and now there's so much I cannot keep up.
Amazing. And I just want, because you mentioned like Casa Satoshi is very business oriented, I wanted to jump in a little bit to the business side. What have you seen? Do you think adoption in Mexico in general is really good for Bitcoin? Where do you think the market is going? Do you think it's going to be like grassroots? Do you think it's going to come from above? Tell us a little bit more about your business at Aureo and what you guys are working towards. So just share the business aspects.
Very good. So From our point of view at Aureo, our mission is to make Bitcoin the default savings technology in Latin America for individual and businesses. So our goal is to create the tools and the onboarding and the education required for people to understand why Bitcoin is important, how it works, and where should they start. And once they've like come to that realization, then we can provide the platform where they can actually start using it, start buying it in custody. We think that Mexico is yet very different from South American countries like Venezuela, Argentina, and Bolivia, because Mexico has a very stable economy and a very stable currency as well. So, but there's a lot of concern from all sorts of levels of society, where maybe the government is creating additional financial and monetary risk. Maybe we'll have higher inflation because of the spending happening, right? There's a lot of these questions being talked about. So I think a lot is going to be on that perspective. Probably from the business and the higher net worth circles, they just want a hedge against the global risks and the national risks. And that's like one approach we really want to take. However, Mexico also has a very growing middle class. And that middle class is people that are, for the first time, they have additional income that they can actually save on. So we think a lot of these people are actually going to start buying Bitcoin because they've moved to the middle class and they want to preserve their middle class status and Bitcoin. And they also have access to education, and or kids that are going to university. So I think this middle class is also very interested in saving and into keeping their position. I think those are the two ways Bitcoin is going to impact the most in Mexico, although remittance is also a very important aspect of this. And probably in the South, you'll see the appearance of some circular economies, such as we've seen in El Salvador and Costa Rica.
What do you think? And I'm sure you've heard about Banixo mentioning that they want to do like a CBDC in Mexico. I think it hasn't had a lot of traction, but maybe for some of the people that might not know or were a little bit doubted, or when people in government try to speak, obviously they try to speak as positively as they can about the subject. What can you share more with us about this topic and what it really means for Mexicans?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit concerned about that, to be honest. Like they seem quite serious with their plans to adopt a CBDC, and I mean, I would tell you it's not just the CBDC. There overall in the past year, there's definitely been a direction in Mexican authorities towards creating more surveillance, more control, and this is particularly this summer they passed a bunch of laws regarding that, and now the CBDC is just a cherry on top. The Central Bank of Mexico, Banxico, has been very clear in their opposition to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Since 2019, they issued a statement saying financial institutions in Mexico cannot offer any virtual asset or Bitcoin services. So a bank in Mexico is forbidden to offer any Bitcoin service. Only a company like mine, which is a non-financial institution, can offer a Bitcoin service. And even there's compliance, of course. I have to comply with anti-money laundering laws, but it remains that like banks and other financial institutions cannot take a step forward here. And I believe that's completely related to Banxico's CBDC plans, right? So they ban financial institutions from offering stablecoin and crypto or Bitcoin services because they want to push them towards offering their CBDC. However, on the positive note, with the influence the United States has on Mexico and the review of the USMCA agreement in 2026, there's speculation, even from the CEO of the biggest platform in Mexico called Bitso, there's speculation that the White House will push the Mexican government towards adopting their vision that is very Bitcoin and stablecoin focused. So we're hopeful that the next year we'll actually see Mexican authorities pull back from their antagonism towards Bitcoin and actually get on board with it through pressure from the United States.
And I think everything you're talking about really ties to education, because I think that if more people in Mexico were actually educated on what it meant when they said the things that they said, they would or maybe have considered not proposing it even altogether if people actually like understood all of the consequences that meant. And as someone who actually is an educator yourself, because you host the Bit Devs at Casa Satoshi, what do you think is one of the most important things in order to reach more people that might be new to Bitcoin, who just don't know anything about it and wouldn't understand when they hear these kind of conversations what people are actually saying or what that would imply for their day-to-day life?
Very, very great question, Tanya. So I guess the first part of that answer is that a different approach has to be taken with different peoples. So, for example, someone that comes from the low middle class of Mexico will perceive it very different from someone that is wealthy, and different onboarding educational journeys have to be built for these different people. It starts with removing the negative connotation Bitcoin has in Mexico. A lot of people, you tell them about Bitcoin, they'll be like, Bitcoin is a Ponzi. My cousin got me to invest in Bitcoin couple years ago, and I got scammed out of my money. But it's because they got told they were investing in Bitcoin, and they were actually investing in a Ponzi. So Ponzi's in Mexico use the Bitcoin brand to sell themselves, and that has created a very negative perception of Bitcoin. So I think it starts with creating custom education onboarding journeys for different people, for different sorts of that are in different aspects of culture and society. And then it goes towards the first step. Let's remove the negative preconceptions that you have about Bitcoin, that you've probably been lied to. But I also think it's also important to get people aware of the problem that Bitcoin solves. Let's talk more about how much irresponsible is the fiscal and monetary policy of government authorities in Mexico and across the world. People should know. Let's remember what happened in the 80s and the 90s with hyperinflation in Mexico, bank defaults, and let's ask ourselves the question: will this happen again? Are we near a similar moment again? Right. So taking a look at the past, building custom onboarding educational journeys for people, and also removing the negative preconceptions people have. I think if we start there, we have a chance at actually changing the perception of Bitcoin in Mexico.
Looking a little bit into the future, what are your perceptions for Bitcoin for like the next 5 years? How do you think it's going to influence the Mexican market? How do you think Aureo will make an impact in Mexico, for example, in the next 5 years? And what do you think the Bitcoin community might just end up evolving in during this time?
Very great question. So I think in 5 years, our goal, let's say from a community point of view first, is to actually get a sort of national association going. I believe the founder of Arcadia actually started a proposal for, or at least a project to like a Bitcoin Association of Mexico. I think that's key towards building like a common front to talk about with authorities, to talk with institutions, academia, so that we can really push our message, our Bitcoin only or Bitcoin first message strongly in the country, right? So I think over 5 years, we will have built that national association, those communication channels with different circles of society, and we'll have like probably even maybe even a sort of financial structure towards the financing of these different communities so that they can educate in their regions. I think that starts there. I think we also need like a national Bitcoin Mexico conference, a moment in the year, and this is I think what Mayan Bitcoin wants to do, a moment where we all get together, and we should do that every year. And from our point of view, in 5 years also Mexico will have more inflation, more effects of the issues that are right now being created. They will have taken effect, and that will push people towards Bitcoin even more, right? Because in the end, I believe that Bitcoin is only a solution to a problem. And if that problem is very apparent, like it's the case in Bolivia, in Argentina, then you have very strong adoption. If it's not much of a concern, like it's in Mexico, then you have less adoption. But I think in 5 years we'll see definitely a shift towards that. And finally, for us at Aureo, I think over 5 years we can not only build a platform for institutions, individuals, and companies in Mexico, but also expand it to Guatemala and other neighboring countries that have a similar reality, maybe even Costa Rica. And yeah, I think that's we got a lot of work to do, but I think the future is bright, and I couldn't be more excited to be part of all this.
Amazing. And then, as a final question, if you could only give one piece of advice for someone who is new to Bitcoin, what would you tell them?
Very good question. I would tell them to start small, because I know so many people that have started too big, went into a bear market, gotten out because of fear, and now they're kind of like mad at Bitcoin. They're like, I don't like Bitcoin because it didn't work for me. So start small and learn and get familiar with the tools. Get a wallet, even if you don't have any Bitcoin. Download a wallet. Start exploring how it works. Or talk to people like me that are already in the circles and can actually make you skip steps and learn faster. Come to a Bitcoin community. Read a Bitcoin book. I recommend everyone to read actually Mastering Bitcoin, which is a bit of a technical book. But if you want to be in Bitcoin and you don't understand how it works, I kind of see it. I kind of see Bitcoin. I kind of see it's an important part to understand how Bitcoin works. So, also all that, and like people that have followed those advice, they've transformed their life. Not only have they started saving in Bitcoin, and they've actually understood that the bear markets are just part of the cycle, and they're no longer afraid of them. But a lot of people I know have gotten Bitcoin jobs, become Bitcoin founders, even met friends and even getting married through with a Bitcoiner. I've seen all sorts of things, right? So I just think it's a transformative experience, and I recommend everyone to start small, start learning, get familiar with the tools, join a community, become friends with Bitcoiners, ask for help. It's really, I think at the end the point is really put your ego aside. It's so, and that just means being humble, right? Like we often say, stack sats, be humble. But that means like just like admit that you don't know about Bitcoin and start learning. I still learn about Bitcoin all the time, right? So I still consider that I don't know anything much about Bitcoin, and there's still a lot to learn. So that's, I guess, the if I could resume it, it would just be put the ego aside and start small and start learning.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Gustavo. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tanya.